In the early years of the U.S. military's involvement in Vietnam, even before the first ground forces landed, America's top military commanders were haunted by what had happened to the last great Western army to fight there. Hiding in the jungles and staying on the move, the Viet Minh had outmaneuvered and outfought the French. They had an almost supernatural ability to appear out of nowhere, strike quickly and hard, and disappear into the countryside again. The American planners knew that, like the French, they would find their superior technology and strength reduced, if not canceled out altogether, by the thick jungle and bad roads. The answer came from the Marines' experience in Korea. There, the helicopter had proven a quick and reliable way to transport men in and wounded out of a combat area. Its speed and maneuverability suggested a new kind of use for a new kind of war. As America began to funnel troops into Vietnam, the groundwork for this kind of war was put in place. Vietnam became the first true helicopter war. The helicopters flying into a hot landing zone, or LZ, became one of the most enduring images of the war, and that was certainly the helicopter's most outstanding role. But the helicopter did everything. They delivered the mail and replacements, flying men on leave, and important resupply missions to far-flung fire bases, and, as in the case of Khe Sanh, even when those bases were cut off and under heavy enemy fire. So important was the helicopter that by the end of the Vietnam War, the U.S. Army, the major user of rotary wing machines, had become the world's third largest air force, after that of the Soviet Union and the United States Air Force. But the large numbers in battle meant large numbers of casualties. During the 10 years of the conflict in Vietnam, the United States lost 4,869 helicopters. Helicopters were in the fight right from the start. The first complete U.S. Army units in action in Vietnam were the 8th and 57th Transportation Companies, which in 1961 landed 32 twin-rotor PSEC H-21s from the USS Card transport ship. But the most notable arrival of 1962 was one of the great icons of the war, the Bell UH-1 Iroquois, also known universally as the Huey. As a result of in-country assessments, the Hueys were quickly fitted with guns and rockets and adapted for jungle conditions. Powered by a prototype Lycoming YT-53L1 engine producing 700 horsepower, the UH-1 first flew on October 20, 1956, at Fort Worth, Texas. In March 1960, the Army awarded Bell a production contract for 100 aircraft, which were designated as the HU-1A and officially named Iroquois. The helicopter quickly developed a nickname derived from its designation of HU-1, which came to be pronounced as Huey. The official U.S. Army name was almost never used in practice. The HU-1 has a metal fuselage of semi-monocoque construction with tubular landing skids and 2 rotor blades on the main rotor. When American ground troops were officially committed to action in 1965, they came with a large number of helicopters. By 1965, U.S. ground forces were pouring into Vietnam, and the newly established 5th Special Forces Group was actively taking action against Viet Cong infiltration routes. The standing order was to find, fix, and destroy the enemy forces where they lived. The team was flown in by unmarked Hueys that would touch down on a number of clearings before the A-team would jump out and head for cover on the run. Bob Wessel was the door gunner.
We were flying a Special Forces group into Cambodia. This was a CIA presidential decision. It was made. We were going over in unmarked helicopters and unmarked uniforms.
There was good reason for the unmarked Huey. At the time, the U.S. government was still claiming that they would not violate the neutrality of Cambodia.
Of course, we weren't in Cambodia at the time. And that particular day, that morning, we flew out and dropped off 3 Americans and 8 Cambodian mercenaries. And their mission was they were along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, They were supposed to watch the NVA movement coming down the trail, unmarked trails, and their basic mission was to capture an enemy truck and bring it back.
No sooner did Wessel and his crew fly out of sight when all hell broke loose for the strike force. As the Berets and their cadre fought for their lives, the air crews picked up their radio messages.
It was Chief Warrant Officer Bill Armstrong. Co-pilot was James Fusel. And there was Gary Land as the other door gunner, and myself. And we had a James Calvary Special Forces medic on a helicopter. So we were one to go and extract them. I can remember flying towards the area, and about treetop level, I was looking down. I could see, looked like there was columns of NVA moving in that area. I mean, we could see them moving in, which is, there's some butt kickers. The NVA, they're regular Army, they're good. But I remember going in, and it was an area where it was a lot of trees, and we had to hover and drop straight down into the area.
The Special Forces team was now in a running firefight, desperately trying to make it to the nearest landing zone and the safety of extraction.
So we had landed, and we had moved away from the LZ and basically set up a perimeter, and just wanted to see if we were being followed. We saw another team across the valley being infiltrated. We could see them. They were about 5 miles away, and we sat there and we watched the gunships come in. We saw the choppers try to go in and get them out, and we also listened to it on the radio. And that was a very difficult time for us.
The choppers were burning up the turbos, trying to get there in time.
As we dropped down in the area, we just started catching fire going in. Matter of fact, they shot all our radio equipment out. It was gone. So we had no communications with the CNC ship up above. So we were basically on our own. And I can remember landing, and there was this fire going on. I could hear Gary firing on the other side, and I was firing.
As the Green Berets and the surviving Cambodians reached the LZ and the choppers, the NVA turned their fury on the rescuing slicks and the air crews.
We had a lot of incoming rounds, and I remember sitting there firing. I had a bunch of them coming toward me, like 15, 20 of them I fired, and they all went down. And they never came back up. About that time, I thought I heard Gary quit firing. I heard him yell on the other side, and I turned my head to look. And when I turned my head, I got hit 3 times in the chest and once through the neck. And probably by him yelling or something on the other side, probably saying me, probably shot me right through the throat. But I didn't pass out, lucky enough, because what happened was I had so much blood on my glasses I couldn't see. So of course I had to take the time to clean my glasses off and get my back together again.
As Wessel cleaned his glasses, the battered team piled into the waiting choppers. The undamaged Huey lifted off. Wessel and his crew members were the only living Americans still on the ground. It was at that moment that something strange occurred. The fire on the left and right sides facing the deadly M60 machine guns of Wessel and Land slackened.
About the time I got done cleaning, they figured out, I guess, they couldn't come through the sides, so they started coming up behind the helicopter. And of course, the R60s were mounted, and you couldn't turn them that far. So I grabbed the M16 and started to get out and spray the area. About that time, I could feel the helicopter starting to move. At the same time, I seen Mr. Armstrong's heads go down. And kind of scary, because I didn't know what happened to him.
As the Huey Slick tried to stay airborne, Wessel looked around at the interior of the damaged ship.
There he landed. I could see him laying on the floor, part of him laying on the floor. And the Special Forces guy in the helicopter, he had been shot. He'd got shot through the elbow and came out his shoulder. And I found out later on Gary Land had been shot through his leg, and some of his toes had been shot off. And the only reason he quit firing was they'd shot his ammo off to 60. And I remember we were starting to fly out of there, and Mr. Calvary, the medic, asked if I wanted a shot of morphine, which I wasn't in no pain.
Even though they were in the air, the danger was far from over for the air crew and their Special Forces passengers.
I remember starting to fly out and still firing all the way out. And I remember we was cutting down. We probably went about 100 yards just cutting treetops out, trying to get out of there. And I remember about halfway back, I seen Mr. Armstrong. He He came back around and flew the helicopter back.
Just another day at the office for the Huey air crews. Most of the units sent to Vietnam, like the Screaming Eagles, were units that had won their battle streamers in Europe. But this was not to be a World War II battlefield, and the tactics would have to be rewritten in the jungles and rice paddies of Nam. For U.S. military purposes, Vietnam was divided into 4 areas called core areas. The first core was the area immediately below the demilitarized zone, which separated North and South Vietnam.
Every division, every combat unit of the United States Army, Marines, and the Navy was given an AO, an area of operation, that we had general freedom of movement. It was a relatively unsophisticated army in the South. These were black pajamas and pith helmets and rusty rifles from the French, when they were there. In the North, no. They had artillery, they had mobility, they had discipline, they wore uniforms, they would stand and fight. And they had a logistical base. It was right across the border. I mean, they didn't have to go far to get it. Plus, they could shoot at us from across the border.
Because the U.S. command's strategy was to pursue and engage the enemy wherever he might be, there were never any clearly defined fronts. With the enemy all about them, U.S. military forces in I Corps had their hands full. To address the situation in I Corps, the U.S. command organized Task Force Oregon. For the 101st, Vietnam met a change in the nature of the division. No longer would the Eagles jump into battle, but would reach their LZs by helicopter.
The mission of the 101st was still to go out, find and fix and eliminate the enemy, but they were changing the 101st to air mobile. We now were 101st Airborne Division, parentheses, AM, air mobile. We now had to think from 2.5 miles an hour, the walking speed of the foot soldier, 2.5 miles an hour, to 80 knots an hour, 80 knots, 100 miles an hour. All of the artillery that was allocated to the division, traditionally, the 105s, the 155s, we now could airlift it. We didn't have to shoot from the sea. We could go in and shoot. We could take them in, put them in at 8 o'clock in the morning, let them shoot up 1,000 rounds and extract them before lunch.
This was the air mobile that was to become synonymous with the Vietnam War, and no unit was more suited or better trained to fight it than the 101st Airborne Infantry Division.